Stihl MS170 Crankcase Disassembly here. This is out of a MS170, but most of these Stihl crankcases they're pretty much the same. So the procedure is very similar for a lot of different Stihl chainsaws. And I think this is probably the same crankcase in the 017, the 018, and the MS180 as well too. Don't quote me on that, but I know those are similar, very similar saws. So basically you need your T27 driver. Well, actually these crankcase screws are usually in there pretty tight, so instead of the actual hand driver, again the impact driver, much quicker to remove these. Just get a hold on it, make sure you got a T27 bit in there, make sure you're in reverse, and you can just take these out real quick. Okay, this should just lift right off. Gasket sealer holds it a little bit sometimes, but with a little bit of force, it should come up. Okay, lift it off, and you'll see some of the gasket sealer usually on there. This looks pretty good. Actually, I'll go through how I clean all this off. Usually when you open these, you want to clean this off and put some new gasket sealer on there. This one looks in good shape, but I'll go through the process anyway. So just lift this straight out, and of course you can take a look at your rings now. These rings are good. There really wasn't a compression problem or anything like that with this saw, but I'm just showing you the procedure now. So, and what you want to do here, well, first clean the gasket off, and then you can take your compressed air and blow this out real clean. Wipe it out first, maybe with some with a towel. Wipe it out with a towel. Get all the oil off there, and then you can take your compressed air, blow it out real clean. You want to look this over too to see if there's any issues with it. Usually there's not a problem with this casting here. There's nothing really goes wrong with that. You can put your finger in on the piston, shine some light down there too. Usually you can feel if there's any problem, any scoring. Just go to both sides and feel, make sure it's still smooth, and then, you know, shine some light down in there and take a look. Not too often problems with the cylinder. More than likely, most likely problem is you'd get some scoring on the exhaust side, which is the exhaust side of the piston is the one without the locator pins. So you want to take a look over here. This one, again, this is in good shape. Everything looks in good shape. Rings are probably good here. Like I said, there wasn't a problem with this saw, but you can have many problems with these, especially a lot of times people run them without proper fuel oil mixture, and that will cause problems. So you can get this seal off. First to get this seal off, all you gotta do is take this clip off. It's just a C-clip on here in a little groove on the shaft. Get that off. Just usually you can just hold one side of the clip with your finger, push down on the other one. It's probably a better idea to use a screwdriver or something instead of your fingernail, but this can work too if you're comfortable doing it this way. And it should just pop right down. There you go. There's usually not a problem with that clip. Now you can take your seal off on this side. Check your bearing here. Actually, just check it for some too much play. You know, normally there's just a little bit of movement in it, you know, side to side, but you really don't want much movement at all. And you can spin it too, of course. It should spin nice and smooth, and these appear to be in good shape. Okay, show you how I remove the gasket sealer or gasket maker, whatever you call it. What I do is take my Harbor Freight rotary tool, and I've got a steel brush attachment on it, steel wire wheel on it, and just real carefully I'll go through and I'll just go over this, and it does slowly chop away at that. And you know, be careful when you do it. I guess I haven't had any problems. I guess you could scratch this to the point where it might cause a problem. I have had no problems doing this. It works great. One thing I will say is wear safety glasses when you're doing this, because little tiny pieces of gasket and whatever else can go flying, and you don't want to get hit in the eye with that. So wear your safety glasses. That's it. So the whole process for this side took me, I don't know, probably about a minute and a half, but as you can see, it just gets all that right off. Nice and clean. Doesn't do any damage. Just cleans it right up. You just got to be careful. Imagine if you held it in one place too long, you might end up digging into the casting or something, but cleans it right off. Now I'll take the air compressor and just blow this all out, and it'll be nice and clean. Here's the other side. Do this real quick. Same idea. Take the tool. That's it. Nice and clean. I'll take the compressor to that too, and I'll be ready for some new gasket sealer. Okay, I'll show you how I get the flywheel off the shaft now. First thing I do is you want to get the rings off first. You don't want to damage the rings. Doing anything with this, it's best to have the rings off. Also, sometimes if you're trying to hold on to the piston doing stuff, you can cut yourself. Of course, that's where gloves come in, but you really don't want to take a chance on bending or damaging the rings at all. So real easy. Here's how I get the rings off. Here's the locator pin. Actually works good as a stop, so that when you grab one side of the piston, you can pull it out and it won't. You want to get that one end behind the stop there. Normally that works. Hold it with your thumb too. Just grab it and it should pop right off. Oh, there it goes under the floor. The other one, same thing. When you get to the stop, hold the piston in, grab it, and lift up. As you're lifting up, you want to work it out of the landing. Go around and work it out. Just like that. Flywheel removal here. So you gotta first get this nut off, 13mm nut. I just take my impact gun with a 13mm socket on it, and you can wear gloves or hold on to it with a rag. Best to hold it by the fins so you get some kind of grip on it. The fins are good for gripping it, and then just hold on to it and it should come off. This one's in pretty good shape, and it came off without too much trouble. A lot of times they've been on there a while and they're rusted on. You may want to squirt some liquid wrench on there. If you let it sit for like a few hours or something like that, it's probably best, and then it should come off. In some cases you might have to squeeze it in your, actually take this same kind of setup with a towel or a rag and put it in your vise. Don't squeeze it too tight, just enough so it grabs, and then take your socket by hand. You'll have more leverage on it then. Okay, flywheel removal. Actually getting the flywheel off. What I do here is I put the nut back on the shaft, just so it's above flush, not quite flush with the actual shaft. And then I drop it in the vise, and you want to close the vise down so it's just open just beyond where these cams are. So that's about where I got it now. About there. Open it just a little more, and then what you can do is, you don't really want to pound the flywheel directly on your bench vise. So I'll take a rag again, slide it back in there. And now bring this nut. You want to see a little bit of relief between the nut and the wheel itself. And what you can do is get your hammer, block of wood about that big, something that just fits inside the. It's not too good. And it just fits inside the. This well here. You don't want to be hitting the side of the flywheel well, and just go to pop, and that's it. You'll know if it's loose, it's moving around. Now you can take your nut off, and flywheel comes off. There you go. Now you can get the seal off, and then taking the bearings off is a whole different game. I'm not going to go into that now, but that's for another video. Ready to put put the crankcase back together. At this point everything's cleaned out. After you're done getting rid of all the gasket, you want to take your air compressor, blow everything out. This you can just wipe down. I took my wire wheel and spun it on top of here. There was a good amount of carbon buildup on there, so that cleaned off real nice. You want to take a look in the ring landings, see if there's anything in there to clean out. If there is, you can scrape it out with you can try to get a pick in there or small flathead screwdriver. I've heard some people take a old ring, just a piece of an old ring, and get in there and scrape it out. But these were pretty clean, so I didn't have to do anything there. And then take your air compressor, blow out anything that might be stuck behind the bearings, and once it's all clean and free of gunk, you're ready to put it back together. These, I took the compressor to the seals, blew everything out inside, got rid of any old gasket that was on there just by, you can rub it right on a towel, get the old gasket sealer off. So yeah, let's first thing to do to get this back together is get the rings back on. I like to just set this here, set the first ring there, get the first end of it just behind the ring locator pin. Make sure that the taper is facing up, the wide part of the taper on the ring is facing up. Hold that part in with your thumb, push back on this side, and then bring it down. That should get that in. And same process here. Make sure the taper is up. Put the ring in right there. And bring it down. There you go. And for the most part, they should stay there. This one looks a little loose, but you're gonna have to make sure they're in position when you go to put it back in the cylinder. Okay, so now get your seals on. Make sure the open side of the seal faces in. Right now I'll put this clip back on. You can just about push this clip on just by hand. Careful it doesn't go flying. There you go. Make sure it's in the groove all the way around. You take a driver. Make sure you can kind of spin it around. If you can't spin it around or it looks like it's scratching or something, then you don't have it on good, but this one's going around good, so I know I got it in there. So now, next step is to basically get the piston in, and then we're going to put the crankcase back together, put the crankcase cover back on. First thing you want to do with this before you start putting it back together is oil this up. Take some oil, some of your two-stroke oil, rub it all around here, rub some inside the cylinder, and go from there. Make sure the flywheel side is on the side where the ignition coil is going to go. So it's going to go like this. Another way to tell is, here's your exhaust port right here. There's going to be no locator pins on the exhaust side. Those face towards the towards the intake side. So it's going to go like that. But the first thing to do here is to get some gasket sealer back on here. I use this Permatex high temp red RTV silicone. Works good. It's supposed to be rated for, I guess, temperatures that are much higher than what this will get to. So found the whole head of the piston and oil up the cylinder, and then we can get the drop the whole piston with the crankshaft into the cylinder the right way. I got just a little 2-stroke oil here. First I'll just get the piston all nice, or the cylinder all nice and oiled up. Reach down in, get as much of the surface as you can wherever the ring's going to come in contact. Just oil it up good. Can't really put too much on. A little bit more on this side. And we should be good. That's good. Now just oil up the piston, the head, get the rings. Can even get some oil inside the landings. That's fine. Just you want this to be looped up good before you try to drop it in. Okay, that's all set. Okay, now you gotta just drop the piston in, the whole crankshaft in along with the piston. Make sure this is the flywheel side. That's the side with the ignition coil. I know that secures there. Also, you can tell this is the exhaust port here. Here's the intake. Exhaust is not going to have any locator pins near it. Those are over here. So now what you want to do is get the rings so that the gap is even with the locator pins. Careful, you move one ring when you try to move the first ring out of place when you try to move the other one. That's how it should look, right there. Now this cylinder is kind of tapered on the way in, so you should just be able to drop it in, push it in. Some of them aren't, and you got to play games with pushing the rings in as you get them in there, but this one you should be able to just drop in. That's the other thing, with the oil helps that out quite a bit too. Should just be able to and as it's going down in, make sure it feels nice and smooth in there. If it doesn't feel really smooth with the oil, then you know something's wrong. So back off the seals a little bit, push it in so that the bearings get just inside those, just inside their where they're supposed to land there. And now once it's down, push the seals in. This assures that the seals are all on that side of the their notch where they belong. You just push them in good. Make sure they're right up against that lip and everything's lined up good. And you should be able to turn the piston up and down good. And now we're ready to put the cap on. Okay, here's the cap. First we'll put some silicone gasket maker on it. Basically, what you want to do is fill this little channel in, and then you can have a little more outside of that. And if you get too much on, you can always pull some off, so don't worry, but it's important that you fill that gap, and you want to fill it also all the way right up to the where the seal sits. The gasket sealer should be right up, kissing up against these seals. So I just put some on my finger here and just start rubbing it on. Okay, so I've got a lot on there now. First thing I'll do is just try to get some away from the edge. You really don't want to have it squeezing to the inside of the crankcase. You don't want anything inside the crankcase that doesn't belong there. And this stuff definitely does not belong there. So I like to just go along the edge here and just wipe off any extra. Now, gotta be careful how you put it on. This little notch, I know on the 170 here, this little notch is it's the pump, the bar oil pump actually fits in that notch, so I know. So that's towards the clutch side, and then obviously this other side is the flywheel side. So one last look to make sure your bearings and your seals are all lined up good. And just place this on. You can kind of watch it go down. Make sure the holes are all lined up good. Should just drop on. You can look at the sides. See if it's coming down good on there. And you should be able to push on it and see that gasket sealer squeeze out a little bit. It'll squeeze out more once you actually get the screws in there. So at this point, take the screws and you can at least get them started with your T27 driver. Carefully you don't strip them. Sometimes what you need to do with these screws is you put them in and go reverse until you feel a little click. Like that. And that basically gets the thread to drop right in where it's supposed to. But you don't have to do that. If it starts going in easy, then you're fine. But if it feels like it's going to start stripping on you, do that. Okay, so the way I do this is bring them down tight. Bring one down tight, go kitty corner, diagonal, bring it down tight, and then the other two. Bring it down tight, just kind of hand tight. And now you can tighten them all even more. And now you can really torque them down good. I just kind of use common sense here and just tighten it up. good and solid, but you don't want to strip these. Just get them good and tight. You can torque them pretty good without having to worry about stripping them, but I don't want to put my hand all the way down at the end, otherwise I do risk over torque. So that's good and tight, and you can see the gasket sealer just coming out. And give the crank a spin. It should be real smooth in there. You can see the rings through the exhaust port. You can see them through the intake. And now you know it's together. Good. Crankcase is all set to go.